Breaking news for the second time in 2 weeks. The Riverside Sheriff's Department is mourning the loss of a deputy killed in the line of duty.
Officers across the country are paying with their lives for failed justice policies. In 2022, a Riverside County Sheriff's Deputy was murdered by a lifelong felon with an extensive criminal history dating back to 2000. This monster was only on the streets because a county judge allowed him to be free on bail following the most recent conviction for a violent felony, which was his third strike. Today we're joined by Bill Young, president of the Riverside Sheriff's Association. The RSA, which is one of the newest FOP lodges, represents over 3,500 law enforcement officers. I am Patrick Yoes, national president of Fraternal Order Police. This is the Blue View. Bill, first, thanks for joining us on the Blue View podcast. But first, I want to welcome you to the FOP, our newest lodge, the Riverside County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and but I also want to thank you for your leadership. I watch the way that you represent your members and the work that you do, and just in such a professional way. And that's who we are. Just law enforcement officers across this country that are invested in our communities, and we all want the same thing. So thank you, and welcome to the FOP. Before we get started, let's tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about you.
Well, I'm a deputy sheriff, as you said, with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department in Southern California. We're nestled in between LA County and Orange County and San Bernardino County, and we stretch from LA County all the way to the Arizona state line. We represent about 4,200 members, 3,500 active. And I've been in law enforcement now since 2000 when I was hired by the Sheriff's Department as a community service officer. Got that niche early on and started applying everywhere to be a cop as soon as I turned 20 and a half. And LAPD picked me up, and I started there in 2002 and was there for a few years and lateraled over to the Sheriff's Department where I've been since then. Since then, I've been assigned to patrol, aviation, and traffic, where I was riding a motor when I got kind of bamboozled into being president and elected president. Yeah. We needed somebody to step forward, and I did. I was on the board of directors, so I stepped forward and took it on with a main goal of wanting to give back to my membership and make them feel appreciated by the association.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have as part of the FOP family. You know, Bill, I want to go back just the last part of last year and the beginning of this year, a 2-week period, just right around 2 weeks. Your agency, your membership lost 2 officers, just senseless attacks on law enforcement. Tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about those 2 weeks and the tragedy that came upon your agency.
Well, quite honestly, I was out actually taking a much-needed vacation. You as president know how, and probably even more than me, how busy we get. So I went away for a quick weekend of golf and got that phone call that no president ever wants to have, that one of our motors had been shot. Immediately went to work trying to figure out what was going on. And, shortly thereafter found out that he was gunned down, shot in the face by a person that shouldn't have been out there, and murdered by somebody that should have been locked up, but wasn't, because our criminal justice system allowed choices to a judge who exercised them and let somebody out that shouldn't have been out. So, went on that and started, the process with that and dealing with the family and ensuring that they felt that they were still part of the brotherhood, and took care of them. And just shortly as that was starting to wrap up and people were just getting back to, I don't want to say normal, but getting back to being able to deal with it. Got the phone call again and just thought that there was no way. And that when I was home and got to turn on the radio and hear all that while I was making my way down there. And that's when we lost Darnell Calhoun as well. So,
yeah, it's tragic. Tell us a little bit about both of these officers.
So Isaiah was a young officer. He had started with the Sheriff's Department as a correctional deputy. We represent correctional deputies as well. And he got the niche, wanted to become a street cop, and went out and started putting his time in and, jumped on a motor like most cops probably would, because we all kind of look up to him. Yeah. But just giving a shout out to my motors out there.
I understand.
But so he jumped on a bike and was newly on the bike, but in watching his body-worn camera, he was out doing what cops sign up to do. You know, he saw a vehicle that just shouldn't have been in the area or caught his eye, and thought, man, that the spider senses are going off. So he started tracking that vehicle down and found it pulled over on the side of the road, and started his investigation from there. And makes contact with the driver, who's, you know, violating all kinds of different laws and everything. And the driver, you know, does his tweaker tale about the vehicle registration and all that. And without any warning or indication, in the blink of an eye, pulls out a gun and shoots our poor boy in the face, killing him instantly. And then he flees the area. Fortunately, we were able to pull the ViView footage, or I'm sorry, not ViView anymore, the Axion footage, and identify the driver and put it out. And thankfully, we had some great cops from the city of Beaumont that were out, you know, diligently looking for the dirtbag, and they were able to locate him on the freeway. At which time, you know, we were able to get troops to the area and fortunately protect everybody else from the raft that he was slowly unraveling on everybody else.
Yeah. And then the second one?
Second one was Darnell, young deputy as well, was working for the city of San Diego, and you know, one of those tired of making the commute down, wanted to get back to the area that he grew up from. He was a Christian raised in the area there in Lake Elsinore, so he wanted to move back, and he was raising his family at 2 young babies, or not babies, 2 young kids, and a baby on the way due in April, and saving up to buy a house, and just went to work like everybody else and answered a domestic call, one that we all answer, you know, a kid not wanting to go with another parent over, you know, a custody exchange basically, and gets the address first, and made the judgment call that, hey, I need to interact and put his, you know, safety to the side, and did it as safely as he could, but interacted right away to ensure that somebody else was safe. And as he approached the house, he was ambushed by the suspect in this case. For what reason, we have no idea right now, because he's still not recovered all the way to where he can talk, and may never ever. But he was ambushed, and then the suspect fled, and Darnell still pursued and entered into a gun battle with a dirtbag who was fighting on his own territory and his own thing. Unfortunately, he was gunned down. His partner arrived shortly after, who the suspect engaged. The partner engaged the suspect in a shootout, at which time the suspect's family, who called us to go there and help them out, decided they were going to interact, and started distracting and yelling and wanting the officer to stop. But fortunately, the officer was able to eliminate the threat by shooting the suspect, and he fell and was taken. They immediately turned to locating Darnell, who was found a couple houses down in the yard of another house, and they scooped him up and took him to the hospital. And unfortunately, he didn't make it when he got there. After a long time, I'd like to give the hospital the hospital staff a lot of credit. They pumped his heart and worked on him for over an hour and tried everything they could, but unfortunately, God's will was to take him from us, and that's where he's at now.
So tragic. So tragic. In both these instances, let's talk about the perpetrator. You know, anybody who's worked in law enforcement for more than a minute knows that the majority of crime in this country is committed by a small percentage of people. Mm-hmm. And when we can take these people off the street, we impact crime. Mm-hmm. When we put them back on the street, crime continues. So let's talk about the perpetrators in both of these. They both had criminal histories, didn't they?
Oh, they did. They both had it. McKay, the one that murdered Isaiah, had a lot more, and definitely should not have been out. That one, he had a lengthy rap sheet, had been involved in police chases and violence towards officers before. He shot a police K-9 at one point in time, and had a woman that he was involved with and held her against her will for several days. Every bit of crime that he could commit, he was committing to to do it. I think he had a lifelong goal to be part of a motorcycle gang. So everything to him was to build street credit, it seemed like. And, you know, he had been arrested. He was going away for life and should have been in jail. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system in the state of California has been geared to helping the suspects instead of the victims. And it allowed a judge to make a judgment call, not a call that she had to make, but a judgment call. And she used her judgment and made the call to release him when he was facing a life sentence. And we believe that that's what made him do what he was doing, because he knew he was going back to jail for life and wanted to try every way he could to get out of doing that. So.
And he had nothing to lose at that point. Exactly. Yeah, it just, you know, these decisions, look, a lot of what we do is judgment calls.
Yep.
You know, we weigh all of the factors and make some decisions, and we live with what the results are. In this particular case, what we need to do is live with the fact that a person that clearly did not belong on the street has impacted the lives of an entire family, and took the life of an officer whose only sin was as he decided to be a public servant and help others.
And you know, it brings up a good point though. Is we're elected officials. You're elected. I'm elected. The judge was elected, and part of the power of being an elected official is you get to make those judgment calls. However, you got to answer for that. So there has been a recall started in the state. The public has started it. We're supporting it, but we're letting the public, the actual people that elected her to be there, do it. And she needs to face it. And if she doesn't get recalled from it, then that's fine. But she does have to answer for that decision.
Yeah. How tragic. And a second incident?
The second incident, he had a lengthy criminal history. Wasn't a stellar citizen or anything like that. He hadn't been in trouble for a while. You know, who knows that if he had actually served the time that he was supposed to on his other stuff, would he have been the same person that he was when he did that? But at the time, he was living a decent life. But you know, was he? We don't know why he did what he did. It just.
Well, safe to say, in law enforcement, there's no such thing as a routine call.
No, none.
And these are two perfect examples, or tragic examples, to illustrate just how dangerous it is to be a policeman and, you know, do law enforcement in today's society.
Yeah.
The reason why I ask you all of this is because you recently wrote an op-ed that appeared in a number of publications, including the FOP Journal, publications in California, having to do with the attacks on law enforcement. The damage that has been done over the 2-year period, but more importantly, all of the failed experiments that have been done so-called in the name of criminal justice reform. And in reality, and I think if we look over and over and over, all of these things have one common factor, and that is the people who do policing every day are people who understand policing. Mm-hmm. When decisions are made by people who have no clue, have never keyed a mic in a police car, have never responded to any of these calls, all as well intended as they may be, there are consequences with it. And removing us from these discussions, we all want the same thing. We all want to have professional law enforcement, quality law enforcement, safe communities. But not allowing us to be part of those discussions has created the social experiment across this country where there's a rush to judgment and trying to change the criminal justice system. And we're seeing the results of it. We're seeing crimes all across this country. Talk about the op-ed. What was your motivation? Tell us about the op-ed and tell us your thoughts. Dig a little deeper into it and tell us, how do we get to this point?
Well, I wanted to give our brothers and sisters that wear the badge every day a voice, because it's happening all over. I mean, shortly thereafter, the officer in Selma was killed by somebody that should have been in jail. And a prime example of what's going on right now is we have an attorney general in the state of California. Albeit he called me and expressed his sorrow for the loss of our officers. But that was it. No public statement about it. It was a personal phone call that he called and gave me. But fast forward a couple months, and he goes on a press conference to announce that he's going to look into the sheriff's department for mishandling of 18 inmate deaths over the course of a year. And although I know inmates are human beings and everything like that, to go out on, as the attorney general, the top law enforcement officer in the state of California, to go out and say that you want to look into the causes of death because you don't believe whatever, or you want to transparent, but you never did anything about, hey, let's look into the reason why in a matter of a month or two, we've lost 3 or 4 cops in the state of California to people that have taken advantage of a criminal justice system that's being given away, and never once announced to look into that. He cared more about people who don't live an honorable life, that, yeah, they're human rights and they deserve rights, or human beings and they deserve rights, and we'll give them to them, but doesn't want to look into the reason why honorable men and women are dying almost on a weekly basis, maybe a monthly basis now, as a result of people that should have been locked up for punishment and crimes that they committed against other human beings. We're losing sight of the victims. The other day we had a bill, or a California Public Safety Committee through the Assembly, and one of the Republican lawmakers, so he didn't gain much traction there, but one of them introduced a bill and bringing back enhancements for gun enhancements. And all the Public Safety Committee members really cared about was, well, we've talked to the parents of the suspects that go to jail, and they don't like it when their suspects, or when their kids go to jail and are incarcerated for a long time, and this is going to keep them away. And never once made any mention about, well, what about the victims of those crimes, that,
right,
the victims that don't get their loved ones back. And so, I mean, I know that's probably way longer than you wanted, but
no, I think what you're doing is illustrating the problem that we have today.
Absolutely.
We can't ignore the fact that when there's consequences to one's actions, that is a deterrent. Mm-hmm. You take away those consequences, I, for the life of me, cannot understand how some people think that a little crime is okay, to suggest that crime is okay, that we're going to legalize certain crimes, how that makes our community safer.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. We all know the difference between right and wrong. We were taught that when we were kids. All right. We hope to think we were taught that when we were kids. So we know when something's right and when something's wrong. Mm-hmm. But when you gray that area in between, well, no one can figure out what's right and wrong. And that's the reality of it. So what we've done is there's no right and wrong anymore. What we're doing is saying it's okay to be, to be a little wrong, and somehow that grows and grows and grows, and with the belief that somehow our community is going to be safer. How does anyone wrap their head around that? I give you an example. Some laws would say that we're not going to enforce petty theft anymore. Okay, well, that's fine. How many mom and pop stores can stay open?
None
today?
Yeah.
I mean, are they not victims?
Well, and
how many
closing.
Can stay open if everything they have is walking out the door and there's no recourse? What about their rights? Mm-hmm. What about the quality of a community when businesses start drying up, and then we create deserts within a community where you can't find drugstores, you can't find grocery stores, you can't find all of these things. You look at these policies, you referred to in your article about these failed experiments, these failed policies across this country. Help me reconcile. Am I missing something? How is it that we think that a lot of these things are going to make our community safer? Because the data is consistently showing in a rise in crime since they've been implemented.
Yeah, it's because they're not caring about those quality of life things. The other day in broad daylight, a lady comes out of a bowling alley in our area to witness 2 people stealing a catalytic converter from a car in broad daylight, and it's because the criminals know that they can get away with it. Like,
what are you going to do?
Even if I get arrested, I'm going to get and get charged or whatever. They're just going to roll it into the 15 other crimes that I've committed in the last month,
right,
and they're going to give me credit for time served, and they're going to let me out. Like, I'm all for adding stuff to it, to call it criminal justice reform if you want, or whatever. Bring back like the old California Conservation Corps, where you go out and clean roads. We got plenty of things that could be done to help offset first-time offenders, or maybe even your second-time offenders. But when they're repeatedly offending, then obviously it's not working by continuing to just cut their punishment. And that's where, that's the reform we need to get into. If we're going to add, alternatives and stuff like that. I ran the Elsinore Valley Youth Court when I was a deputy at the Lake Elsinore Station, and it was one of the best programs out there prior to really kind of going away. And that was, neat, because I was able to give these kids that, maybe they stole a pack of gum or whatever, but to not ruin their life. And we gave them community service, and we did programs with them to teach them what life's about and just the common core values of life. And to watch these kids, later on grow on to be, some became cops, some became other things, but just to make stuff out of their life, I get it. I'll support that all day long. But when you start continually violating, and now the quality of life is, going down for everybody, that's where I have to draw the line. And I mean, you get rogue prosecutors that don't want to prosecute. They're more worried about prosecuting cops for doing their job than they are the criminals that are out there. So it's tough. So I wrote the article to just try to bring attention to it. Again, nobody from the assembly or the lawmakers, the legislators have called me and reached out and said, no, hey, what's going on? No, we got them in California that are introducing bills to take away canines. And that's a local lawmaker that was elected out of, the area next to our office. Do you think he once picked up the phone and said, hey, Bill, this is what I want to accomplish. Can you help me accomplish that?
Or tell me your thoughts on the pros and cons of doing so.
Yeah.
Hey, look, what we see in your article is striking because it's a problem that exists throughout this entire country, and that is there's a movement by a number of people, and it's the vocal minority. It's a small group of people. But they get the press, and politicians pander to them. But polls show that Americans across this country are in fear of crime. 84%, and in a recent poll that I saw, we're all united on our concern and our safety within our communities. Yet we still are going down this path of these failed policies, and these failed policies are, in a nutshell, are decriminalizing criminals and depolicing police. And I try to wrap my head around trying to understand how some of these policies that we have a belief that's going to make our community safe. That's the first problem I have. And the second one is, how many times do we have to look at a rise of crime over a 2-year period and say, you know what, maybe we need to reverse course. Maybe we went too far, but we don't. We although we do see cities doing that, we do see people backing up saying, maybe this wasn't the best approach. Maybe there's a better way to fix it, and having everyone give some input on the solution to it, as opposed to the rush of judgment before. I want to change gears a little bit because there's a challenge across this country. We know what the problem is. The problem is that that criminal justice system, as long as we are going to continue to take away the deterrence of people following the rule of law, then we see the consequences from it. We see the damage that is done in cities across this country that have gone down that path, and in some extents continue to. And I'm very pleased to see that there's some change in it. But there's another crisis in law enforcement, and I've been talking about it for a while. You and I just left a conference where our urban cities got together and talked about the issues that are facing our larger police unions across the country, and how we're impacted. And one thing that is a common denominator, and one that we've been signaling for quite some time, and that is the best of the brightest just aren't taking this job. At the same time, the people who have committed their lives to public safety are saying, you know what, I'm either eligible for retirement or I can find more stable work somewhere else. And they're leaving our profession at a rate we've never seen before. Now, there are a lot of factors that do that, but I will argue with you the greatest one is this. As we went through this whole thing about depolicing, that ship has sailed. But I still think that a lot of cities they've figured out the best way to depolice is just to take away the attractiveness of this job. And somewhere along the way, we forget the fact that we talk about crime going up, 200%, 400% in some cities. And, numbers are impersonal. It's people. There are people and lives that are changed with every one of them. This failed experiment is costing people their lives. It's making our communities and our jobs less safe. But it's not something that's going to be fixed tomorrow, because the damage that has been done during that time has put us in an existential crisis on the next wave of law enforcement. We have a manpower shortage across this country, and a number of factors. And here we are. Every law enforcement officer, any profession, I don't care what your job is, we need two things. Everybody. We need to know that what we're doing is important and that we're appreciated for doing it. And if you don't have those two things, then I think it's a morale killer in any business, any profession. So here we are in law enforcement. The majority of people in law enforcement were invited into law enforcement by other law enforcement officers that saw that quality and said, you know what, you should apply. They didn't get it because they saw a commercial on TV. They saw it because it was sold to them as saying, you know what, you've got the qualities. Help us be the next wave of law enforcement. Help us define the future of law enforcement. They're not coming to this job because you know what, the best and brightest can go make money somewhere else. And don't have to subject themselves and their families to the damage that has been done by politicians and media and many who are much more concerned or much more interested in the problem than they are a solution. What are you seeing in Riverside having to do with recruiting, and how is all this rhetoric affecting you?
Yeah, so it's affecting Riverside County just like it is everywhere else, as you mentioned. I mean, we're getting people applying, and fortunately we have a great sheriff that we helped get elected a couple years back, 4 years ago, or 5 now. So we get people applying, but you're not getting the people that are applying that want to do this job for a career or want to stay loyal to the department or the area. They're not, most don't even live in the area yet, or they're moving to the area. But they're not doing it for what you and I signed up for this. Like you said, we signed up to this to give service above self.
Servant's heart.
Yeah, and the servant's heart. And like you said, we were talked into it. My wife's a deputy for San Bernardino County, and if you asked her today, would you let our daughter become a cop? She said, no, go be a firewoman or fireman. And that's the sad part right there. It also plays with the Hollywood and the media. You can't find a show on TV nowadays that doesn't portray the police in some bad light or anything like that. I mean, we grew up with Chips and Adam 12 that portrayed cops as the servants that they are, and so it all plays a big part. But yeah, we're having the same problem. I mean, it's like that chief from New York said, we're expected to talk like lawyers and think like psychologists and perform like athletes and be second guessed on everything and third guessed on everything and scrutinize on everything. And people just don't want to do that. And then, all these departments are so short staffed, so they're not even getting time off. And they're starting to realize, hey, I can go drive a tractor and become an apprentice and then a member of their union and make just as much money and have nights and weekends off and holidays off and go to every kid's function that I need to go to on the weekend and be at home. And, these new cops get on and I have to work Christmas. Yeah, you got to work Christmas,
Somebody has to.
Yeah, there's a good portion of my life where I didn't get to work or where I didn't get to be home at Christmas or holidays or miss my daughter's birthday. And I know that that's the line that everybody says, but it's the truth. Yeah. It's the absolute truth. And until you walk a day in a cop's shoe, that's one of the biggest things that we do. We take a lot of our lawmakers who will do it, and we take them down to the, shoot, don't shoot simulator and the use of force simulator. And they all walk out of there going, wow, and that's great to actually see that, and I appreciate it. But until you walk a day in the shoes, and I tell my own members that, I got members that like to complain about this or that job's not as hard as my job or whatever. I'm like, go walk a day in their shoes and then you can feel it. And if we get more of these lawmakers to go on ride-alongs, not during the daytime with the hand-picked deputy that's just going to go out and shag whatever calls. No, suit up at a graveyard shift and put a vest on underneath your jacket
as they come.
And take whatever the next blip is on the screen, and you go to that call and see what these guys are out and gals are out there dealing with, and they'll see that cops. You know it as well as I do. Cops, we're good. The majority of us are good, but they want to attack that small percentage, But there's bad in every profession.
In every profession, yeah.
To include politicians, they're bad politicians. They're bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad teachers, but that doesn't define the other, million of us that are out there that are actually doing the job, and ultimately doing the Lord's work. And send me.
There you go. That's
I'll
it.
Go forward.
Send me. There you go. I'm going to ask you one more question. So, I mean, you have an impressive association. It's well-rounded, covers it provides such great benefits to your members, so vitally important to their quality of life and stability, not only for that, but for the community as well, all of that. But you made a decision and made a big push to become part of the FOP. Tell me what that motivation was and why you felt like that having that national presence, state and national presence through the FOP was beneficial.
Well, the biggest thing for me is the brotherhood and sisterhood of joining that national voice for law enforcement. Since I became president, I've gone to all these meetings and listened to everybody and found that the one thing that we fail at, the firemen are so good at, is they have a national voice, and we don't. Everybody and anybody wants to be the voice of law enforcement from every little group or whatever. And my thought was, why go out and recreate what's already been done for 100 years and not just get involved? So I got involved. I like having the national voice and being part of that. I mean, all the other benefits are great. I tell my members, I'm like, there's so many, sub benefits that the FOP offer. You log on and find out which one it is, because it may be, a scholarship for me, and it may be cheap dental for you or something like that. But it was to join that united front and try to help create one voice and bring my membership to it and do all that. So, and then, there's other things I'd like. I know that the FOP is looking at doing the medical trust, and I'd love to be a help with that, because I think there is strength in numbers and we can continue to grow. But I wanted to put the ego aside and say, look, this is something that's been around for 100 years, and let's get involved and give our 2 cents.
Yeah, well, 364,000 members across this country, making a difference in the lives of their communities. That's welcome to our family, and just very much appreciate all you bring into the FOP as well. It's not so much of what the FOP can do for you. It's what you can do to collectively help better improve the criminal justice system and the quality of life for our members. So welcome aboard. And to our viewers and listeners back home, thank you for tuning into the Blue View, where we talk about those issues that are so vitally important to the men and women who suit up and show up every single day and make a difference in the lives of those we serve. Thank you.
Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. To get the latest from the National FOP, make sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook at GLFOP and on Instagram at FOP National. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.